And so let me go ahead and welcome you. My name is Josie Jen Morgan. I'm the coordinator of the Pre-Health Professions program here at the University of Arizona. This is our first event of this kind for our kickoff. And this event really is focused for those students who think that they're applying this year to their health profession, whether it's medicine or dentistry, but we wanted to gather everybody together who at this point is thinking about applying to their health profession, meaning you're going to take the Mcat, you're going to gather letters of rec. So we're going to go into more detail about that. And so the other thing is we also will have students here who may not be applying, but this is a wonderful opportunity to get the heads up of what to look for. So if you're not applying to get in for 2023, because typically the application process takes about a year. And so if you're not applying for 2023, then you're shooting for 2024, which would be the next year. And if you're here early, that's wonderful because you'll get to hear all this information to make that decision whether or not you think you're ready to apply and that you're the most competitive applicant. So with that in mind, I want to let you know that today's presentation is kind of fun because I pulled it together. And we have been doing presentations for a very long time. And not in addition to this particular presentation, we have other recordings. So this presentation actually pulls a lot of our other presentations and highlights those areas that we feel that is most important. So isn't this very fitting that it's Halloween weekend? So we kind of Frankenstein this pre-health presentation. So welcome today. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And we're going to go ahead and get started with the presentation. So right now we are going to be doing the presentation on health profession school application cycle process. As I mentioned, if you think that you're applying, it takes about a year to apply. So this presentation is really going to give you the overview of those things that you should consider when you're applying to your health profession. And so the picture here on the left-hand side are actually 4 students that were our pre-health ambassadors who graduated recently with their MD from College of Medicine, Tucson. And so we're very proud of them. We also have an ambassador program here in our office who help us do outreach. We will be recruiting students in the spring to help us for the next academic year. So if you're thinking about maybe volunteering, or if you're thinking about you want to help out with pre-health students who are in high school, middle school, talk to parents, we will open up that application in spring. So stay touch. These students actually, the one third from the left, Brianna, we had her as a freshman. And so we've known her for many years. So welcome again today to this presentation. And I'm going to have Nettie Gupta, one of our pre-health advisors, read our land acknowledgement.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Josie. We respectfully acknowledge the University of Arizona is on the land and territories of Indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the O'odham and the Yaqui. Committed to diversity and inclusion, the university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign Native nations and Indigenous communities through education offerings, partnerships, and community service. Thank you.
Thank you, Nettie. Let me go ahead and introduce our team. So we're located in the Bartlett Academic Success Center, the new building behind Bear Down Gym. We used to be in Bear Down Gym if you've come to visit us before. Our program focuses on graduate level health professions. Some of the common ones are medicine, pharmacy, physical therapy, optometry, dentistry, physician assistant, but we also help with other programs like occupational therapy and other graduate level programs. So we work with approximately, we have 12,000 students who indicate that they're interested in a health profession across all majors here at the University of Arizona. So we'll work with all students no matter what you major in. And it doesn't matter whether or not you're a science major or non-science major, we can integrate those courses into any curriculum. So just be reassured that you don't have to be a science major to apply to your health profession, but you want to major in something you love. And for this focus group, you guys are thinking about applying. So the major that you're in, one of the things that you should consider is if I don't get in or I'm a reapplicant, what do I do with this degree? So definitely work with your major advisors in that process of having a backup plan. So we engage students, we work with students from high school to students who have graduated from the university, or students who graduated from another university who've come to the U of A to take maybe additional courses because they want to apply to their health profession. Every year, we have about 400 plus U of A students who apply to medical school. On our website, prehealth.arizona.edu, there's actually a link to a fact sheet that Ethan Bull has pulled together that kind of reflects where do our students apply as far as the health professions, as far as the numbers, overall numbers nationally. So you might want to take a look at that. But I'm going to go ahead and let our pre-health advisors introduce themselves to you and tell you a little bit about, what areas they work with and things like that. So let's start with Nettie.
Good morning again. Yes, my name is Nettie Gupta, and I am a new pre-health advisor. My background is in global health, and I am also the coordinator or co-coordinator with Josie for the pre-health ambassadors. Thank you again for being here today.
Hi, I'm Lauren Mosley. I am a pre-health advisor. My focus is on recruitment and outreach. So I'm going to work with Josie to run our expo event this spring semester. So you all should definitely plan to attend that. It'll be in February. And I also run our social media. So if you aren't, you should definitely follow us. We're on Facebook and Instagram at UAZ Pre-Health. And that's where you will be able to register for our upcoming events, including Expo and our other workshop series events. We'll have the link is in our link tree in the bio. So yeah, I'm glad you're all here today.
Thanks. And I'm Ethan Bull. I'm a pre-health advisor. I work with students in any part of your experience or your career here at U of A. And I focus primarily on our personal statement workshops and our patient experience internship, our partnership with Banner University Medical Center, both the main campus and South. So awesome. Thank you. Back to you, Josie.
All right, thanks. So this is an extraordinary team. They have many talents, and we have different partnerships across the campus, statewide, local, nationally. So our experience can really help you. So ultimately, after this presentation, if you want to make an appointment, definitely, make contact with us and we can do that. And we'll remind you how to do that later. So moving on. So the big question is, are you ready to apply to your health profession? And I really want to emphasize that it's not all GPA, it's not all, test scores or the high stake exam that you need to take. But once most health profession programs determine that you're not an academic risk, they will move on to other things. They want to know, why are you doing this? What clinical experience? What volunteer experience? Your letters of recommendation? What do other people think about your ability to be a healthcare professional in their field? And your personal statement. This is going to make you uniquely different than any other applicant that is applying. So that personal statement is really vital when you're preparing that document, so that those that are reading it who don't know you can really get a first impression of who you are and why you're doing this. And we'll go into more detail about that. And then ultimately, when you're applying, the idea is to get an interview, because if you don't get an interview, you don't get in. So those interviews, you want to make sure that you're prepared for that process. So we're going to break this down and talk about each one of these areas, but just realize that, and I've been advising for over 20 years. I saw the Mcat change twice. I've seen the process of application and what they were looking for as far as admissions committees, what they are looking for as far as the cohort of those students as they go through the application process. And so years ago, it was GPA, it was high stake exams. And if you met those matrix, you got into a program somewhere, someplace. But they found that they really wanted to produce physicians or healthcare professionals with other skills, attributes, characteristics, skills that they bring along with not only being brilliant. And I'll tell you, I love working with this population. You guys are so motivated. You are top notch. You're driven. You know why you do this. You're balancing your academic and your outside activities to an ultimate goal of going into a health profession. So with that in mind, aside from all these areas, they really are wanting to know, do you know about your core competencies? So some of you might know about core competencies, but basically beyond GPA, beyond Mcat scores, or GRE scores or DAT scores, what things are you knowledgeable about as far as gaining that experience? And the interesting thing, over the years, again, it used to be GPA and MCAT scores, is that all the different health professional programs that oversee their areas have all come up with core competencies. And I know that a majority of our students that we work with are interested in going to med school, but we definitely, work with those students interested in medicine that want to go to DO school or naturopathic school or podiatric school, which all fall under the College of Medicine. And then you also have, physical therapy and physician assistant. But just to emphasize that it isn't just something that maybe the medical schools are looking at, but if you're thinking about other health professions, then they're also looking for these characteristics and attributes that you bring to the table. So these pre-professional competencies or attributes, and that can be interchangeable when we talk about that, is your service orientation. Everybody says, I want to help people. How do you demonstrate that? Not only do you describe it or talk about it, but what did you learn from that service orientation as you help people? Your social skills, how you interact with others, your cultural competency. You're going into a health profession that you're most likely going to be dealing with folks that are not like you. How do you interact with individuals who may not be like you? And so understanding cultural competencies and the impact of understanding cultural awareness with different populations as a future healthcare provider is going to be really important. And teamwork, is almost a given and something that you already know. But definitely, if you're going into medicine, it's not just the doctor that works with techs and nurses and physical therapists and social workers. It's a whole team approach when you're talking about the patient and having access to healthcare and making sure that that patient is being taken care of. Oral communication, whether it's written, verbal, you want to make sure that you can communicate. And so oral communication is really important. Ethical responsibility, self and others. So when nobody's looking, do you do the right thing, right? So you want to make sure that you demonstrate that you are ethical, whether or not, and you take on responsibility. And how do you demonstrate that? If you're a volunteer at a hospital, do you show up on time? Do you follow through with tasks? If you're a lab researcher with your PI, are there days that you don't show up and don't tell anybody? These are things in your characteristics, and how you demonstrate them is going to be really important in this whole process. Reliability, dependability, resiliency. If you're first in your family to go to college and you kind of struggled maybe your freshman year, or you come from a rural area that didn't have like AP courses or dual enrollment, did you keep trying? Did you surround yourself with people that can help you? Are you resilient? You didn't just take no for an answer, but then you figured it out and you also had other people help you. Capacity for improvement. Not everybody's going to know everything at a given time. So knowing that when you get into your health profession, there's going to be a huge capacity for improvement, because you may not be, have had that experience in gaining that much information as you're taking your courses in your health profession. So demonstrating, can you show capacity for improvement? What things have you improved on? And then at the bottom, this one is actually the link to the AAMC for MD schools. So they actually have a whole page and section talking about core competencies. So I'll keep referring to this as far as pre-professional core competencies, because every piece, every aspect of your application that you're going through, they're trying to get answered in this, how you demonstrate it, whether it's volunteering, whether it's in the class, whether or not you're a preceptor. So just keep in mind that they already tell you what they're looking for, right? They already know that your GPA and your high stake exam scores, but what makes you different than anybody else is how you attain these And what did you learn from these experiences? So let's talk about academics. I think for advisors here, we all get, question about, oh, I heard like it's a 3.8 or 4.0 that gets in. There's actually a lot of wiggle room as far as the academics. What they're trying to demonstrate is, can you handle the academics when you go into professional school? So just know, and you may know this, but we'll go ahead and say it anyway. Just know that, for instance, like here at the University of Arizona, you have established a GPA based upon your U of A courses that you've taken here. When you apply to professional school, they will calculate a different GPA. They will look at every course, every grade that you've ever received. If you were dually enrolled in high school, and then you came to the University of Arizona, and let's say you went to Pima College and took some classes, you're going to have to draw transcripts from all institutions that you attended, and you're going to list every course, every grade that you've taken. And here's the other note, just to keep in mind. So for the University of Arizona or other universities, a lot of times students have the possibility, and you do too, and you might have used the grade replacement option. So if you did a GRO on a class, let's say you got a C in a chem class your freshman year, and you decide to retake that Chem 151 or the OChem. For the University of Arizona, it fixes your GPA here at the U of A, but it does not fix your GPA when you're applying to professional school. They will see both grades. They will calculate both. And this is where, as advisors, you want to make sure that you come in and talk to us about those things. Or if you're planning to GRO something, you want to talk to us, because basically, for instance, if let's say you did get a C in Chem or a D or something like that, and you were planning to retake the course, questions that we would ask you is, did you learn the material? Maybe you were working 20, 30 hours, you were taking 18 units, and you were spread really thin. It was your freshman year, and it was a transitional year. If it is that you're taking it because you want to increase your GPA, if you didn't learn the material, then probably it's a good idea to retake the course. But if it is that you learned the material, but it was situational, but you had enough information to move on to the next class, and it was a C or better, then basically the idea is to demonstrate that you can handle a higher level course. So if you pull an A in 152, you made some adjustments, you cut back on your coursework, you were able to focus on your classes. That demonstrates that you have that capacity for improvement, right? You made some good decisions, and you came in to talk to someone about that before you move forward. Or if it is that, let's say you struggle in organic chemistry, that is one of the courses that a lot of students struggle in. And so typically, let's say you did pull a C in OChem, and then you're thinking about retaking it. Again, we would ask you, did you learn the material to move on? Was it situational, like COVID? When COVID hit, it threw everybody into a tailspin. And so the academic piece was really stressing students out. And the other thing during that time was that a lot of schools before COVID indicated they did not accept online classes, but there were adjustments made at a national level. These associations got together and decided, hey, you know what, COVID, everybody's taking courses online. So everybody's in the same boat. So they agreed that online courses were okay. So, and that's something that, as far as keeping in touch with us, we know about the policies, we know about the national trends. When things like this happen, we go immediately out there and say, our students are freaking out. They're only doing classes online. You say you're not accepting them. What do we do? So we try to notify all our students of what was happening. So in the GPA and looking at those courses, definitely you want to come in and talk to someone if you're in that situation and you're thinking about retaking a course. Let's talk about it, because ultimately what they're going to look for are trends and patterns in your academic coursework. We get asked all the time, students going to withdraw from a class, right? Last day to withdraw is this Sunday on Halloween. And so if you were thinking about withdrawing from a class today, it's your first withdrawal, that is not a problem. It becomes a problem if it starts to develop a pattern. You register for 18 units and you drop a class. Or let's say, and we've seen this where students have, family issues that hit them. COVID was one of them. and there were multiple, maybe total withdrawals from school. So basically what they're looking for is trends and patterns. If you struggled in the beginning, they're looking for that upward trend. So if you pulled C's in your, introductory courses, but you pulled an A in OChem, you pulled an A in biochem, they're looking for those upward trends. They're looking to see if there's any excessive withdrawals or excessive repeats. And a lot of times students who haven't come in to see us, they may have tried to take Calc 3 times. And the thing about calculus is that, here's a note, is that for most health profession schools, and I would say except for maybe pharmacy, that requires maybe 1 semester, and there are some other health professions, but there's only a handful of, let's say, medical schools that require calculus. So depending on the schools you're applying to, on the Mcat, it's only college algebra and statistics. And so we'll see that student that comes in that took Calc 3 times, but it was for the major, which is a whole different ball game. But if you're taking it and you're trying to prepare yourself for the Mcat or the standardized exam or the high stake exam that you're going to take, generally speaking, it's only college algebra. So just know that. They want to know, have you demonstrated that you can handle your academic and your balance, your personal experience outside activities? I want to stress here that this is where, we get a lot of students that ask us or tell us, they just need to accept me. And when I get in, I'll show them. No, as an undergrad, as you're preparing for this process, you are demonstrating right now, can you make good decisions? Do you balance your personal and your academic life? And if something sidetracks you, like COVID, what do? Right? Are you going to go around and ask for help? Or are you going to pull back and, hide? So they want to know what you're doing now, because more than likely, that's kind of an indicator that they will see when you get accepted into your professional school. So they're trying to figure out, have you demonstrated some of these core competencies? And also, can you balance your personal and your academic life? So, do you ask for help? That's probably one of the biggest things that we get asked for help all the time also, is that, again, you guys are brilliant. When it comes to letters of recommendation, it means getting and developing rapport with faculty. And if you're a brilliant student, you pull A's, you don't need to ask for help, and you never dropped in on the office hours, do you ask for help? When you get into your health profession school and you hit a wall, what do? Do you surround yourself with people that can help you? Are you an individual that says, no, I'm going to just, buckle in and I'm going to do it myself and I'll figure it out myself? When you're going to your health profession school, it is a team approach. You're going to rely on each other. You need to show that if things get tough, what do? How do you surround yourself? And more than anything else is, do you ask for help? Or do you make these decisions all by yourself? Because if you do, and you don't talk to faculty, you don't develop that rapport, that is one piece of this big puzzle that is in the process of applying to your health profession that has become vital, because they want to know, what do other people think about your ability to go into that health profession? And bottom line, from the Mcat scores or high stake exam and GPA, what they're trying to figure out is, are you an academic risk? If we take you in, how do we know that you can handle the curriculum? And what are you going to do, if things get tough? Do you pull back? Do you ask for help? But ultimately, they want to know, if we take you in, can you handle that curriculum? One of the sayings for medical school is that when you get into med school, you ask any first year, they'll say it's like drinking water out of a fire hydrant. How do you adjust to that? You've always been a great student. Maybe you've never, failed at anything. And then all of a sudden you get hit with all this information. How do you decipher all that information? How do you surround yourself to succeed? So let's talk about the other piece that a lot of students ask a question about, is probably the exam. As far as each health profession has their own standardized tests that they're looking at. So we're looking at the medical colleges admission test for the Mcat, and that's also for DO school, Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine. It's also for podiatric medicine. And so typically the Mcat is the exam that you need to take. The Mcat is 8.5 hours long. So you want to be prepared when you take this MCAT. You want to absolutely make sure that you prepare yourself for this process to take the standardized exam. And we'll go into a little more detail in just a little bit. For dental school, it's a DAT. For PT school, OT school, PA school, and it's interesting because during COVID, a lot of these schools decided not to use the GRE anymore. They didn't feel that it really indicated much of what they needed for the admissions process. So, but some schools still do that, and they still use a GRE. So if you do need to take it, depending on the school that you're planning to apply to, it's a graduate record exam. And then optometry is a OAT, and pharmacy is a PCAT. Again, not every pharmacy school utilizes the PCAT. Some schools do not. So if you're thinking about going into a pharmacy school, then you want to make sure that you're taking the PCAT for those schools. So let's talk about that high stake exam. The question is, and again, during this whole process, you're answering these questions in your head, but have you taken the courses needed for this exam? We get asked all the time, do I need to have all those courses? And I would say you do, because that is what's going to be on the test that you're taking. So you want to be sure that you're prepared. It's one thing to take the exam, and it's another thing if you don't have the information, how well you'll do. And a lot of times students think that they can study and take the course at the same time. And really, you want to build yourself for success. You want to make sure that you're prepared. If anything, you want to make sure you take a mock exam so that you get an idea of how you're going to do. For the MCAT, and I would say most of the students who are applying or work with us really are interested in medicine, but it's an 8.5 hour exam. And you really have to develop the resiliency, and also probably the biggest thing, not so much the knowledge, but what to expect in this 8.5 hour exam. What are they going to ask you? How do you prepare? Many times students who have taken mock MCATs, typically if they've taken 6 or 7, 5, 6 or 7 full length 8.5 hour exams, what we're finding when we talk to students, it's pretty reflective of how they're going to do on the real thing. So if you're taking these exams, you want to make sure that you have an idea. Do not take these exams to test the water, because they know how many times you've taken it. Even if you don't release your score, they'll know how many times you've taken it. And you want to make sure that you take it when you're best prepared and most competitive. So the other thing is, are you going to use a prep course to review? We've seen students do well in the coursework, and they're great standardized test takers, and they do well. They utilize the national information and practice tests and materials like at the AAMC. But basically, again, you want to make sure that you take practice exams to get an idea of how you're going to score. But we've seen students do well with and without the prep courses. So the bottom line, and here's a stressor, is that you want to identify, how do you learn? If you're taking an exam and you have to review, how do you as an individual best review when it comes to something like this? Do you need someone in front of you going through it strategically? Do you need to have someone provide just the materials, that you're really independent and you're really motivated and you're very disciplined? We've seen students develop a strategy of how they're going to take that exam. But no matter what, you should identify what it is that you need in a course, or what do you need when you review? Because that, as far as like some students, a lot of times, many students will come in and say, I just feel I need to do a prep course because it's almost one of those things they check off, and they feel, well, everybody else is doing it. But you want to make sure that if you're doing your prep course, what is it that you're looking for in that prep course? What are they offering you? Because you should be the consumer. If you don't get the score you want, what do they have as far as an option? So those things as far as being a consumer, but definitely there's a lot of resources. The other thing is, Ethan did a workshop, and this is where I'll plug in. We do a lot of workshops, and we just did one recently. Ethan did one on resource materials for the MCAT, what to expect, and that's on our website. So definitely take a look at that. we hold no, we don't endorse any particular prep course. You are the consumer. We want to make sure that you know the options. Think Tank has a GRE prep course, and they also have an Mcat prep course. So just, consider what is it that you're looking for. And you can always come in and talk to us, but take a look at that recording. What is going to be your strategy to review for this exam? Again, we talked about, do you need a prep course? Are you going to do it on your own? How are you going to review? And when do you plan to take the exam? And also, again, have you taken any mock to get a sense of what does the exam entail? So moving on, okay, we talked about GPA, we talked about academics. I'm actually going to spend a lot of time on this area because the letters of recommendation, we get asked all the time. And actually, even for applicants who don't get in, maybe they ask for a letter early on and then they come back a year later and they have to ask that professor again. There's also strategies and etiquette in the process of asking for letters of recommendation. And so with that in mind, let's talk about letters, because this is also going to distinguish you from any other applicant that's applying. So health profession letters of recommendation. I highlighted this, I bolded it because it takes time to develop rapport. If you're applying right now and you have not talked to a science professor or engaged with, let's say, your instructor, and you need a science letter, if you're applying this year, you've got now, this fall, and you've got spring. And so we'll talk about, timelines. But typically, you should be engaging with your professors. We encourage freshmen every semester, get to know at least 2 of your professors. Go in during office hours, have them read your personal statement, ask them about questions that you might ask us, right? So developing that rapport takes time. You can't just cram this overnight and expect them, because many of them are writing maybe 50, 100 letters of recommendation. So you want to make sure that you develop rapport with your recommender. The other thing about the letters of recommendation, unlike scholarships and maybe other programs, you might get a copy of that letter of recommendation. So, but know that when you're applying to these programs, you'll have an option of not waiving it. But if you don't waive your option, if you waive your option for the letter of recommendation, then you don't see it, you don't touch it. It goes directly from the letter writer up into the application service, or if you're using like Interfolio or something like that. But if you don't waive your right to access and you get to see the letter, it kind of takes out the credibility. And the caution is also with waiving your right to access, they can say anything about you. If you were undependable in a research and you asked that PI to write you a letter and you consistently showed late or other issues came up, maybe that's not the best letter you want. Because if you waive your right to access to your letters, they can write anything about you. And I've seen letters that can hurt you as much as they can help you. You want to get the best letters possible, the strongest letters possible. So when you ask someone for a letter of recommendation, you want to ask, can I get a strong letter of recommendation, not just a letter of recommendation? This is not a process where you just check it off and say, okay, I got 3 letters. That's cool. I'm ready to go on. You want to make sure those are strong letters of recommendation. The letters of rec should complement your personal statement. A lot of times, if you're in your personal statement, you're talking about the best experiences and people who might have mentored you or programs that you learned from. Many times, if you're talking about a research experience that you had and the PI was your mentor, or maybe you were in the UBER program, undergraduate biology research program, and Jennifer was there for you, she knew you, they're going to look for a letter from that source. This whole process, they're looking for consistency in your application as a competitive applicant. So if you talk about this great experience, they're going to look for a letter from that source. If you don't submit one, then it raises a red flag generally. So if you were in the Blazer program and Viriana was your mentor and she offered to write you a letter, but you talked about it in your personal statement, but you didn't get the letter, then it kind of raises red flags. everybody knows everybody else in this process, especially with our Arizona schools. You'll be surprised the people, I mean, even administrative assistants, when you come in for an interview, they know you also. So just know that you're always on, people are looking, make sure that you do well, you don't, keep your nose clean, but these letters will reflect your experience and future as a pre-professional in that program. And also the letter should tie in some way, somehow, as far as the pre-professional core competencies. So you definitely need strong letters of recommendation. And just to let you know, U of A, you might hear this if you're applying, a school might ask you for a committee letter. We do not offer a committee letter. We used to years ago. We're just too big. So they know no matter where you're applying that you go with your individual letters of recommendation. If for instance, and also we've been asked, oh, if you don't offer a committee letter, can the pre-health advisor write the letter? We will only write a letter if we know you in a classroom situation, or extensively know you, like if you're an ambassador, right? Because we get to observe those core competencies, you working in teamwork, communicating to audiences. So we can speak about that. But if we don't know you and you're just trying to get a letter, we can't speak about it, and it might hurt you instead of help you. So U of A does not offer a committee letter. And the pre-health advisors, typically, if we don't have you in a class or know you extensively, we can't write you a letter, and you probably don't want one from us. Oops. So topics, and I know there's a lot of points here. Actually, we'll have the PowerPoint. It'll be on the recording. So if you need to review it, but topics for the letter, usually it's the amount of time and circumstances to which they know you, to what capacity do they know you? And then applicant strengths, the areas that need to be improved, maybe there you had a course and again, it was an academic area and you did better, you took another course from them and you pulled an A. Like for instance, let's say you pulled a C in, intro bio MCB 181 with Dr. Pimentel. And then you took his class, MCB 404, bioethics, and you pulled an A in there. He could talk about you in 2 different courses. If you engaged with him, let's say in your intro bio, and then you did well in his MCB 404, and then you preceptored for him, right? So then he can talk about maybe areas that you improved, how he knew you in the classroom. Stressful situations are handled by the applicant. So let's say again, like COVID hit or other personal issues, a letter can draw attention to that or cover that area if you need it to be addressed. The assessment of the applicant's maturity, applicant's ability to have a good relationship with peers and faculty, specific areas which applicant distinguishes himself in your class. Like, do you take on other classes or other duties? Did you become a preceptor for that class, like organic chemistry? Extenuating circumstances that considered interpreting in the applicant's grades. Again, let's say you had to work 30, 40 hours all your undergraduate years. This could be an opportunity for that letter writer to address how you balanced your academic and your personal experience. The rating of the applicant. Sometimes they want to know, okay, of all the students in Dr. Zoe Cohen's class, are you the top 5%? Are you top 1%? She's worked with a lot of pre-health students. So, is it that she can compare you to other pre-health students that are applying for the same programs? Supervise applicant in a patient care setting, anecdotes that demonstrate the applicant's interpersonal skills. These are just some of the topics. So a lot of times, again, these letters will complement your personal statement. So if you talked about a challenging situation and your letter writer knows about that, that shows consistency in your application. How soon should I request my letters? If you're applying like this round, you need to ask now, because basically it takes time for them to write the letter. I would suggest give them at least a full semester, 3 or 4 weeks at least, to write that letter, because these letters are really important to you. So basically the process, how it goes is that generally you would ask them now, or you could ask them in the spring or early summer, but you should have known them before that, right? So if you know this person that you're asking and they've known you since you were a freshman, they can talk about how they've known you for 3 years as you're ready to apply. Letters typically do not get submitted until after you've started your primary application. And then in the secondary process is typically when they get uploaded. Because when you start your application, you'll have an opportunity to either print out or send out digitally a form that you give to your letter writer that gives them instructions on how to upload it. So you want to make sure that these letters of recommendation. So if you haven't connected with anyone and you're applying this year, you could develop that relationship now, absolutely. Continue that relationship in the winter and spring, and then prep them up, and just realize that you do want to have the strongest letters possible, right? So I get asked to write a lot of letters, and I've written a lot of letters in the past, and I know a lot of our faculty have also. But your recommender, so let's say your recommender agreed to write you a strong letter of recommendation. So what do, right? One, you want to make sure they get a copy of your resume. If you're an enrolled student, utilize the career services to update your resume. After you graduate, I believe they charge you. So utilize all your resources here at the University of Arizona as an enrolled student, update that resume, give them your personal statement, because this is going to give them insight on who you are, why you want to go to this health profession. If you do it hard copy, attach a thank you note. If you do it digitally, definitely make sure that you put in an email that you thank them for their, their time and dedication to writing this letter. For those that are applying to medical school, and many of the programs do provide this, guidelines for writing letters of evaluation for med school applicants. So this actually gives them information, because the national organizations are trying to standardize some of these letters. So instead of, the student was a wonderful student, got an A in my class, this really talks about those pre-professional core competencies. In this packet of information, whether hard copy or digital, put a nice cover letter thanking them for, agreeing to write your strong letter of recommendation. And then, like for the MD program, even a COMIS and other programs, you can print out the hard copy of the letter of request. In your primary application, you will let them know what letters you plan to receive. AMCAS, the MD application, it allows you to upload 10. Don't do it. So, and we'll talk about how many letters is appropriate depending on the schools you're applying to. But definitely you want to make sure that you give them all the information. And then one thing that I didn't add on here, but I always appreciate, set up a time for them to sit with you and meet with you and talk about, or have them interview you if they have any questions, or if there's anything that you want them to address in that letter of recommendation, because that's important, again, for consistency. Because if you talk about academic challenges, and this professor was really instrumental in, providing you support and mentor and understood your situation, having them talk about it and how you got out of it and how you kind of redeemed yourself is really important to an admissions committee. They want to see that capacity for improvement, and that you communicated with others that helped you with this process. So offer to set up an interview so that they can ask you any questions, or that you can relay information to them that you would like them to include in their letter. Oops. So this is what the letter writer guidelines looks like. It's on the AAMC website. Very helpful. So take a look at that, attach it. Because the other thing is, there are faculty and other people that maybe they're non-science or non-math that you're asking to write a letter of recommendation. Maybe they've never written a letter before. Remember, this is really important to you. So you want to tell them what they need to do for their letter. And again, you shouldn't look at it, you shouldn't touch it, you shouldn't see it, because ultimately when you apply and you hit submit, you verify that you have met all the guidelines, right? So you want to make sure that in these letters that you don't touch them, you don't handle them. But here's the thing, this is my tip to the students that I talk to. If you're up for an award like a scholarship or a nomination, and they write you a letter of recommendation that you can see. Many times you get to see their style, what they say about you. And then many times letter writers, I know I have, modified a letter like that, which you've already seen. But when it comes to medical school, I will adapt it for the medical school, which you don't see, but at least you get some insight on how that person writes. And if they've never written a letter for you or written a letter for medical school or health profession, it's really specific. So you want to make sure they have all the information. So letters of recommendation. So that if you're applying, so this boils down to how many schools do you apply to on average? And again, I'll use medicine as kind of the gauge because that's a big population. You know, if you're applying to 15, 20 schools, you're applying to a variety of schools that have different set of requirements for their letters. So we suggest if you're applying to multiple schools, 2 science professors, a non-science professor, a clinical letter, the last one could be research, volunteer work, community involvement. And you want to make sure that, you know, when you get these letters of recommendation, they want to know as far as, you know, different schools will ask for different letters. Like one school might say, send us, you know, your a science professor, a clinical letter, and the other one can be anything. Or another school may say, send us 2 science, a non-science, and then whatever. Another school might say, send us 5, we don't care where they're from. But typically you're looking at 5 or 6 letters of recommendation. Again, if you make an appointment with us, we can kind of brainstorm. Also, like for College of Medicine Tucson, they only need 3, right? And so depending on the schools you're applying to, but if you're applying to multiple programs, then you want to make sure that you have a letter that covers what they want, that you're not scrambling at the end. Now, for those students, and we do have students that say, I'm just applying to College of Medicine Tucson and Phoenix. I want to stay in Arizona. I'm really not applying anywhere else. So then you would look at those schools and then determine what type of letters you need. But if you're really competitive and you're really applying to multiple schools, then we want to make sure that you cover all your bases as far as the type of letters that they might be asking for. So these are the must-haves. And again, I kind of think they're common sense, but apparently it's not, because we always get folks that say, oh my gosh, we received a letter with no letterhead, and they said that they did something at the University of Arizona. So these are the must-haves. Your letter should have letterhead stationery. If they're a U of A professional faculty person, they should have letterhead that says University of Arizona, right? Not on a blank sheet of paper. You know, if not, you want to state within the letter writer, why it is not on letterhead. Maybe they are retired from the university and they don't have access to that. So that would be a reason. If it is, and I know that we do get some students that, let's say, volunteer or assist, let's say, a patient at their home. So that person is writing a letter, but they're not affiliated with anybody. So then it wouldn't, but they would describe that in the letter, you know, why they don't have it on letterhead, and then address it to Dear Admissions Committee. And then this form, the letter request form, again, is for the MD schools, but many of the schools do also provide this, this type of request form. It gives a letter writer the information they need as far as to upload the information. Okay, let's talk about writing the personal statement. So in the personal statement, again, this is one of the areas that makes you uniquely different, right? Because you get to tell your story. You know, Ethan mentioned that we have a patient ambassador internship at Banner. You know, maybe 10 ambassadors on the same floor with maybe the same folks that are on that floor, but they walk away with very different things that they've learned. And this is where, even though it's a similar experience, your experience is what they're going to really be looking for. So what we did here is we listed all the different application services and their word count. And this includes, you know, spaces and everything. So depending on the application that you're looking at, you know, AMCAS for the MD program is 5,300 characters. That gives you like a page and a half, maybe. So know that it's going to be limited. And writing that personal statement is going to be really important because it's going to make you different than anybody else, right? Your story, your journey, why you got where you are right now. Maybe you have a wealth of physicians in your family and you're like, your grandfather was a physician, your grandmother was a physician. And so, you basically know, this is what you want to do. Maybe that's where the interest began, but you've done things since then that demonstrate you really want to still pursue this profession and that you have doctors in your family. Maybe you're first in your family to go to college. Maybe you come from a rural community like Douglas, Arizona, or Yuma, Arizona, or, San Luis. What makes you uniquely different? What was your journey like? Where did your interest begin? Maybe it was a grandparent, who had diabetes, you went to the doctor's office with them. Maybe you were an athlete and you got injured and you want to go into sports medicine. Whatever the reason is, where did that interest begin? But more importantly, they want to know, what have you done since then? What have you done academically, personally, to prepare yourself for this profession? We do see a lot of applicants that apply and they talk on their personal statement basically about their whole family and why it was important. Maybe there was a family member that had cancer and it really impressed them, and it impacted them tremendously. But if you only talk about that experience, when an admissions committee reads that, what they're going to think is, and many times they will, is that your only experience? Maybe that's where the interest began, but is it enough to sustain you in this process? So typically, if you talk about that experience in the beginning, maybe that's where the interest began, but how has it evolved? So, and we have again, a workshop on personal statement. It is probably one of the hardest documents to write because it's about you and people who don't know you are reading it. So you want to make sure that you tell your story, who believes that you will be a great healthcare professional? Did you have any challenges in your life? Again, I point to those pre-professional core competencies because many times when you're writing your personal statement, not only are you writing about, I did this, I did that, I observed this, I observed that, but how did you tie it in to the core competencies? Was it communication? Were there challenges? Was there a capacity for improvement? Did you engage with other folks and other communities that were not like you? So that personal statement, they're looking to see, how do you line up with some of those attributes or those characteristics? We already know who your audience is. So it's not like you have to write a persuasive, statement to say, okay, and beginning as far as like a writing exercise that you might have had previously in English, you already know who's reading them. They're admissions committee people, they're secondary readers in the process. Many of them are very familiar and have been trained to read personal statements and also when you submit your secondaries. So your audience, most of them are health professional programs, use centralized application services where you submit your personal statement along with your application to all schools to which you're applying. This means that your statement needs to be applicable to all these institutions. The people reading the statement may be faculty members, administrators, researchers, other medical students, other physical therapy students. It's not uncommon to have first-year students sit on an admissions committee in the program that you're interested in. And they have a keen insight, right? Because they've seen other individuals who have applied. They applied, they know what it means. And so they know as far as, writing that personal statement. They may have read thousands of personal statements, but they have never met you. So this is your introduction to the person that's reading it, and you don't know who's reading it. So realize that it's also a first impression, right? They don't know the details of your experiences. You've had that brought to you to the point of applying to this program. So your statement has the potential to be truly unique. And it is so powerful. I'll tell you, when we read personal statements, when we work with students, it's just amazing what you guys do. I mean, not only be brilliant and do well academically and demonstrate, the things that you want to do, but outside the classroom, you're working for Z Mansion, you're going with Flying Samaritans to the border, you're helping at the COVID pod because it's like, I want to get some experience. How do I get it? And COVID is not allowing me to do that, right? You guys found ways to gain clinical experience. So let your audience know that. And this is your audience that we definitely know that that's who's reading this. So, tailor your statement to that. I'll tell you, students that I work with, typically they'll revise their statement 10, 15 times before it gets to a point that they're comfortable. Many times it's a style, many times it's being concise, is trying to get that a point across. Definitely have people read it to edit it for grammatical structure. I've heard many times admissions committees who have English backgrounds, to them, that's what they're looking for is grammatical structure. And if you messed up and you didn't take the time to have someone read it and check it for grammatical structure, everything else gets lost because they're looking to make sure that you looked at the details, not only told your statement, but because it's so important that you made sure that it was checked at many different levels. So again, are you in the right profession when you're writing this personal statement? Again, these are the core competencies. So in your personal statement, you might hit on 2 or 3 of these. Again, when you're writing that personal statement, if you see your statement saying, I did this, I did that, I observed this, I observed that, you really need to look at it because they want to know, what did you learn? Give us that's why it's called a personal statement. Give us a personal example of what did you view? How did you learn? What did you learn? What was the takeaway message from this? And what do you want them to know when they read your personal statement? So some of the tips, strive for depth rather than breadth. So, make sure that you go into detail and also support that with your own personal experience. Narrow focus, 1 or 2 key themes, ideas and experiences. Try to tell the reader something that no other applicant will be able to say, because again, it is your personal experience. So only you can tell that story. Provide the reader with insight into what drives you. That's one thing I hear a lot from admissions committees. When they read a personal statement, they want to feel that fire that you have. Why do you do this? Not everybody, again, you heard me say that we have 12,000 students on this campus that think that they're wanting to go to a health profession. We work with about, 400 people who are actively ready to apply. What happens to all the other folks? They might have gone into health professions that isn't necessarily like medicine, dentistry. They might have went into administration. They might have not and dropped out and not been pre-health afterwards. But you're motivated and you want to tell your story. So focus on the positive. One of the things that a lot of applicants, they feel compelled to, it's like they want to talk about the grade or the Mcat that they didn't do well in. Your personal statement is not one where you want to work or talk about a touchy subject because there isn't enough time to explain it. If anything, it might throw up a red flag, right? So if you talk about having a challenging academic experience, if you don't have enough time to whip it around and talk about it in a positive or show what happened afterwards, then you want to make sure that in that you end up on a positive. So if you throw something out there that was challenging, and this is where sitting down and talking to someone, whether it's a writing skills improvement program, think tank, or us, or any other reader, you want to kind of get that feedback. Because if we pick it up and we read it and it's like, wow, I don't think that they resolved that issue, then you want to make sure that if you're going to use that example, that you really work it through and that you have enough time. So describe and evaluate your experiences rather than talk about them. Proofread, carefully for grammar, syntax, punctuation, word usage, and style, and definitely be concise. The other thing about the personal statement, you're going to start out with probably throwing everything in there just so that you can kind of brainstorm, and then you kind of tease out different things that you might use for a secondary application. So maybe you didn't have enough time to talk about it in your personal statement, But maybe in your secondary, where you have maybe a little bit more time, you could talk about that issue. Or they might even ask you, like, tell us a time when you failed that was not academic, right? And if you wanted to talk about academics in your personal statement, you could utilize that opportunity in your secondary to talk about a time that you failed that was not academic. So they want to know, because they actually previously, schools would put, tell us a time when you failed, and it was always OChem. Everybody failed OChem, and they talked about how they retook it and how they studied for it. So that's why they put the, the disclaimer, tell us a time when you failed that was not academic. So, think about that. Other tips, do not complain or whine about the system, because you don't know who's reading it. And if it's a doctor and you're talking about, and they're going to say, wait, this person isn't even in med school yet. How can they be complaining about the system that they don't know or completely know? So be very careful about that. Do not preach to the reader. We see that too. Oh, physician, a great physician is, and they start to describe what a great physician is, right? So don't preach to the reader. You can express opinions, but do not come across as, extreme. Do not discuss, your minority status or disadvantaged background unless you have a compelling and unique story that relates to that. And this is about the personal statement, because on the application, there is a place where if you feel that you're a disadvantaged background, you can answer that question and you can explain why you feel that you're of a disadvantaged background. Do not use boring cliches. We see that the sirens were blaring and there's blood all over the ER. And, they really want to get to, why do you want to be and go into medical school or physical therapy? So intros or conclusions, because that also takes time away from your space that you could talk about something that you're doing. The other thing it could come across as you're trying to pad your personal statement because you don't have enough experience. We see that a lot. If students are applying the first time and they only have maybe a semester, maybe 2 semesters of clinical experience, you'll see things where they start to pad things. And so I'll tell you, these readers are very attuned and trained to look for those things. And something like that does jump out at individuals when they see that there's not enough in their personal statement of substance of what they personally experienced. Do not use passive voice. I was fortunate to have been awarded versus active. I sought out the opportunity because it was important to me. Those two statements are so different. So, I think we're running on time. I love it. So the interview, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because, the interview, actually, you get in, we'll talk about what type of interviews. So again, pre-professional core competencies, keep that in your mind. The different types of interviews, you have traditional open, which the interviewer has access to all your information or part of your information during the interview, or a closed interview like College of Medicine Tucson is closed. The interviewer in the MMI does not have access to your information. So when you talk to them, you can't say, and according to my application, because they don't have it. It's really just to judge you when you walk in the door, what type of person are you? This is also the area that I would say, if you get an interview, you got a shot at getting in, because if you don't get an interview, you don't get in. But if you get an interview, they are seriously looking at you. I'll give you an example. Our College of Medicine Tucson had about 10,000 applications last year. They interviewed 650 people for a class of 120. Even 650 sounds like a lot, but you were offered an interview. And you have to prepare for these interviews. Traditional interviews, yeah, they could be open, they can be closed. It could be a panel interview where they have 2 faculty interviewing you. They could have 2 faculty interviewing 3 students. It could be a variety of different types. It could be a hybrid. The University of Michigan does a hybrid. They do a small MMI, like a 6 rotation MMI, and then they do 3 interviews. So between those 2, they do a hybrid. And then, a lot of schools are moving towards the multiple mini interview, and College of Medicine Tucson, Phoenix both do that. I take that back. Phoenix is doing, is it Vita? I want to say I think it's that one. But I don't think they were doing MMI during COVID, but I'm pretty sure they'll go back to MMIs. So the mini multiple interview. And that's where if you could visualize, and because it's online, like right now, they're doing the virtual ones, is that it's kind of like Zoom, and then you have breakout rooms. Each room is like 7-minute interviews with different people. And so they'll ask you a traditional question like, why do you want to come to this school? Or, why do you want to be a physician? Or, when you had a choice to make a decision with limited information, what did you do? Right? So there's 6 different rooms that they go to, and then each one has a different interviewer. So I really just want to end with, we're really here to help you. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I want to emphasize that, this process takes quite a while to prepare and to, gather all your information, be the most competitive applicant that you could possibly be. So that's why we're here, because we can help you with that. And if anything changes, national trends, right now it's a very holistic review of the applicant. So they're looking at all different pieces of your application. So we are located in the Bartlett Academic Success Building behind Bear Down Gym. That's our phone number, and that's our website to the central area, but you also have pre-health where you can make an appointment online. We do see people in person, and then we also see them virtually. And then the best way to stay in touch with us, get heads up on any of the workshops that we're doing, is to like us on Facebook, and then definitely stay engaged in Instagram. And then that's how you make an advising appointment with us. So here's the big question. So this is a preview of what you will need to do if you're planning to apply this year to get in for 2023. Are you a competitive applicant? As we went through this presentation, checking off those things that we talked about. Do you have people that are going to write your letters? Do you have clinical experience? On average, those applicants that get in typically have between 2 to 3 years worth of clinical shadowing experience. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It could be 3 to 5 hours a week, but it's consistent. You don't save all your clinical experience for the summer or winter session, but that every semester, whether you're involved in a club, whether or not, you're in the EMS club, whether or not you volunteer at Z Mansion or any of the other programs, you want to make sure that you show and demonstrate that this is really something that you want to do. They realize that you're a full-time student, that you can't be working or volunteering full-time. We do have students that are scribes, and they're maybe doing 15, 20 hours. So again, balancing that academic coursework and gaining clinical experience. I'll tell you, one of the best things is, having that patient experience ambassador program. If you need to be full-time, we do have internships where you earn credit, upper division credit. So let's say it's a semester that you're planning to, study for the Mcat in the spring. And let's say you're bilingual in Spanish. You could take a course called Faces Conversantes and earn upper division credit while you're studying for the Mcat, while you're taking your sciences, and you need to be full-time for scholarship or financial aid. There's ways to be able to balance all that. And that's why we're here to help you. Have you, completed most of your prereqs? Definitely completing the prereqs, let's say for the Mcat, if you're doing medical school. But for instance, like the College of Medicine Tucson, you can have some of the prereqs that you've not completed, but they have to be done by the time you matriculate. So let's say, for instance, you've not completed your genetics course. You could, be applying this year, but then let's say you take genetics in the summer or you take it in the fall. So if that's one of the outstanding courses as far as prereqs, but you've done a majority of your coursework and completed it, then absolutely you can do that. But for the Mcat, you want to make sure that you complete all the courses. Have you identified your recommenders? This is a good time. If you are ready to apply, you can start lining up those letters of recommendation. Do you have that clinical and volunteer experience? Making sure that you can talk about it. You can write about it in the personal statement. The letter of recommendation can reflect that. Have you started or thought about writing your personal statement? Have you been keeping a journal? Is there a common thread that runs through your journals? Maybe it's women's health that you're really interested in. Maybe it is border health or health disparities. Maybe it's academic medicine and you're thinking about an MD PhD program. So these questions you should be asking yourself. So what do I do now? So let's say, yeah, I really want to apply. What do I do? So stay in touch with us, make an appointment, keep up with us on social media, make an appointment to talk to a pre-health advisor, begin drafting your personal statement, identify potential recommenders, develop a strategy and begin reviewing for your exam, attend our events and workshops, and then look at those that we have recorded. In January, Ethan will be doing a personal statement workshop. In the spring, we have something called Expo. And Expo is where we'll have different panels come in. So for those that are applying, they love to talk to you. So Expo will be an excellent time to get up to date and connect with some of the health profession programs. View past pre-health recordings on our workshops and seminars. So I want to emphasize, don't compare yourself to anybody else. And the other thing is, we want to make sure that you tell your story, right? You want to make sure that your story is different, and it is, because everybody's experience is uniquely different. This is your journey, where it began, how you've really pursued it. And so now you have to tell your story and really keep everybody involved and ask for help. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and unshare my screen and we can open it up. I know that the advisors have been monitoring the chat. I'm sure we got a lot of questions. I'm sure they threw out lots of links. So let's open it up for questions.
We did have one question in the chat, Josie. So for the PowerPoint, I know we are going to be uploading this video, everybody, to our website. But the PowerPoint, could we email that to people or upload it on the website? What would you?
Yeah,
like
we
to
can
do,
we can upload it onto the website. That's not a problem.
So there we go. That's the answer to that. And I mean, I don't actually think we got anybody else. I think everyone was just enraptured. But a lot of people were responding to, the questions that we were putting in of what's your, what year in school are you and what are you studying and stuff like that.
So who was the majority? What was the majority of people?
It's pretty all over the place. I think we mostly have juniors and seniors. I think most people, it kind of looks like most people are not going to be applying yet.
Okay.
But some people are. Some people are planning on applying this year. And actually, while we talk about the chat, I'm going to put everybody who's still here, I'm going to put a link in the chat to a feedback form for us. So please fill this out. We are also going to do a drawing for some Mcat prep materials, and we are going to use that feedback form to determine, our drawing winner. That's the names we're going to use. So please fill that out, especially if you are interested in the Mcat thing. And even if you're not interested in the Mcat thing, please fill it out so we can always improve our events for you.
And I really want to thank everybody for being here. I know that classes were going on also. Last year, we actually did another event and did it on one of your spring break days. But now we're back into a regular academic year. So we'll see how we can, bring a bigger audience. But definitely this information, again, it provides an overview. I want to emphasize, don't be overwhelmed. If it is that you're not applying now, it's okay. Because a lot of times students don't apply in 4 years. Many of them will take a gap year. The other thing is, what are your plans? Maybe you want to study abroad. We have a study abroad in Spain. We're hoping to get back up and running in summer, right? Maybe you want to integrate those things. Maybe you want to go to the Peace Corps. Maybe you want to gain other experiences. These health profession schools want to be sure that you've done everything you've done before you start school, so that, there isn't anything that you regret, or because once you're in that health profession program, you're going to be on a fast track to complete that degree. And so they want to know that you're well-rounded, that you have interests outside of the sciences, but that you're strong in the sciences, right? But we have dance majors and music majors and, business majors that apply to these health professions. It's all a strategy, and we're here to help you navigate through that. So, come see us. We look forward to meeting you. Any last words from my
Well, I was just gonna
advisors?
say, like, maybe people have questions. Anybody have questions? One popped into the chat right now, yeah. And I, raise your hand or unmute. Like, we'd love to talk to you too. But the question that Faye just put into the chat is, will there be an announcement on the social media pages when that pre-health abroad or pre-health program in Spain will happen?
You betcha.
Yes.
And we've had
Yeah.
students go. Actually, we did it for about 5 years. And I actually went down to Spain to check it out before we started. It's wonderful. You're going through the clinics, you are shadowing, and you don't have to speak Spanish. So actually they do like a orientation where you actually do an online Spanish course and medical terminology. And then, yeah, you're in Spain during the summer, you earn credit. I think it's kind of expensive, but we do work with study abroad. So if there's any funding or anything like that, but it's really a great experience. So looking for those things, study abroad, if you're just in the beginning process of this, when's the best time to study abroad? When's the best time to do these things? Or National Student Exchange, right? National Student Exchange, Guam is one of the sites. So, if you wanted to build in some of these type of opportunities, it'd be great. Any other questions?
Faye?
Okay, sorry, it's just easier than to type it.
Yeah.
So it was sort of mentioned earlier that, if you were like in a research program like UBURP or something, it's pretty good to have a letter of rec because otherwise it looks a little bit odd if you were in it, but then you didn't include it. So I actually was in something similar like that, but I was mainly an undergrad at U of A several years ago, and that program's no longer around, and most of the people who are related to that program have all like retired.
Which one was it?
I just want to make sure that's like sort of situation that's going to be pretty like not going to be at like it won't look weird if I don't produce a letter of rec because I've definitely fallen out of touch.
What was the research program? Who was the
I forgot
PI
the name
or?
of it. It was the one that the neuroscience department used to run before they ran out of funding.
Have you maintained contact with the person that would write the letter or no?
I have not. Because I was actually working as an engineer for a while, so that's why.
Oh.
Well, and I think the point with this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Josie, is that if you are saying this was a very impactful program for you, so if you are listing it as one of your most impactful activities, or if you're writing about it a bunch in your personal statement, that's when you need the letter,
Okay.
right?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Because if it is that you're not putting, because I would guess that you've done things since then. So recent letters are really important. It's just like if you're a reapplicant, you don't want to apply with the same application. If you stop volunteering, there's this big gap, right? So maybe you didn't get in the first time because you didn't volunteer or didn't have enough hours or volunteering, but then you stop volunteering. If you applied again, you're applying with the exact same application. There should be some change within a year if you don't get in. So one is letters, and minimally, if you at least change the date, the letter writer, but most letter writers like myself will include what happened in this past year. Maybe you completed a master's, maybe you did other things while you were working full-time and you were a scribe, so the letter should reflect, if you talk about in your personal statement, in that's the best experience. The reason why I would question it is then, hey, if that was a long time ago, but you still didn't talk to them. Some people do leave the university, like I said, but they still maintain contact with them. They can write a letter. It probably won't be on letterhead, but they can explain, I was a coordinator, or I was a faculty, or I was a PI of that research program. Doesn't exist anymore. However, I maintain contact with the student who's applying.
Okay, thank you for addressing that, you guys.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
And Isabel wrote into the chat, is there some kind of timeline we should be following? Like, should we have our personal statement done by a certain date?
Before you ask your letter, by the time you get your letter writers, because I know the personal statement's really important, right? That's why we have our workshop in January, because that's when it all kicks off. So you go to this workshop.
We don't have our workshop is in March.
Oh, my bad, March.
Sorry.
But it's before the application opens up, right? But you can come in and talk to us about developing a personal statement. We also have a D2L site, d2l.arizona.edu. It's called Pre-Health Central. Anybody can self-register. And there's a whole section on personal statement. I actually pulled excerpts. Again, I kind of Frankensteined a lot of our presentations and information on the presentation today. But is there a timeline? Yeah, you know, you want to get it to your letter writers, right? To prepare for that, at least give them a draft. And then finalize, yeah, by the time you hit submit, that personal statement has to be on that application.
And the
So you
sooner
should be
you
working on
draft
it.
it, the sooner you draft it, the more people you can have read it and give you feedback. So if you draft it this semester and then you come in and you talk to one of us and we can give you feedback, and then you adjust it, and then you can show it to your friends and they can give you feedback, and then you can show it to think tank and they can give you feedback. So so giving yourself more time is not going to hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
And Kyla asked, what if you did clinical a semester and then research and then clinical? Is that going to be a gap?
No, because you're still doing something, right? A gap, like not doing anything. Maybe you're still involved in clubs and organizations on top of that, right? So they want to see that you're still engaged and interested in your health profession, whatever it is. So yeah, sometimes students will do that because again, there's only so many hours in a day, but as long as you're clinical / shadowing / research, right? Doing some of that, moving towards the direction of your career goal, then you're fine because you're asked at least answering or filling in the blanks, that there isn't like a semester you didn't do anything. And probably more importantly, these activities reinforce why you're doing this. You know, some students come to us and they focus so much on academics, they do well academically, but they didn't do any shadowing. We see a lot of students like that. And then what happens is then they volunteer and then they find out they don't like people throwing up on them or being, you know, disgruntled or yell at them if they're, you know, volunteering. You know, so you want to find out, is this a profession I want to pursue? Because patients are not happy, right? How do you diffuse a situation? How do you surround yourself with people that can support you? So they want to know that you have a realistic understanding. When you shadow, here's the differences between clinical and shadowing. Sometimes they cross over. But when you're shadowing, you're following the doc or the physical therapist or the occupational therapist. You're following them to see what the day-to-day life, the roles, the responsibilities of that profession, right? They may or may not allow you to interact with patients, but that shadowing is just observing. Now, clinical experience is dealing with people and patients. Maybe you're a physical therapy tech, or maybe you volunteered at McHale, right? They have a volunteer program. They work with athletes. Maybe you want to be a physical therapist and you want to go into athletics. And so you've been volunteering at McHale for 3 years and you watched, the sports medicine department and you interact with the athletes, and maybe you were an athlete that was injured and maybe you were, on a volleyball team and you get to observe this and you interact with the patients. Or like our patient experience, those students are on a floor and they are interacting with patients.
Any more questions from everyone?
I'll tell you, hang in there. Again, you guys are highly motivated, ask for help, come see us. If you want to work out a timeline of when do you do things, concretely, we can do that too.
And I'll put the link tree again in the chat. So the link tree is where we're going to have all of our upcoming registration links. So that's probably how you registered for this event. But as other events come up, we're going to be putting the registration in there as well. So it might be a good thing to like bookmark or just follow us on Instagram and check the link in our bio on a regular basis. The link tree does also have a direct link to make an appointment with us, as well as a direct link to our video links from the past. So we've referenced all these different webinars that we've recorded and we posted, and Ethan's been putting them in the chat. But if you're ever like, 2 weeks from now, you're like, oh, I really wanted to watch that Mcat webinar. Where was it? It's in the link tree. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you everybody for coming today. And we look forward to having you involved in our other workshops and events. We will do the drawing for the Mcat books. It's like, yes. I think it's like $500 worth of Mcat material.
We already have a few people who have sent in the feedback, but I'll put the link in the chat one more time. So if you haven't yet, that is how we're going to be doing that Mcat drawing. So thank you all for those of you who have provided feedback. We love it. Thanks for coming, Alonso.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully we'll see you soon.
Have a wonderful Halloween weekend, and we look forward to seeing you over at Basque or on Zoom. Thank you again for coming today. Have a great weekend.